It all started on a Thursday morning when I found a folded piece of paper taped to my mailbox. At first glance, it looked like one of those coupon flyers for gutter cleaning. But no, it was stamped with the dreaded logo of our HOA, Timber Pines Community Association. The letter, printed in Comic Sans because of course it was, read, "Dear resident, you are in violation of Article 3, Section 7, Subsection B of the Timber Pines Code of Conduct. Your mailbox flag is red. All mailbox flags must be HOA-approved forest green. Please repaint within 72 hours or face a $150 fine." Now, I wish I were making this up. My mailbox flag. The thing that tells the mail carrier, "Hey, I have outgoing mail." Apparently, red offended the delicate eyes of our HOA president, Karen. And yes, her name is actually Karen. I laughed, tossed the paper on my counter, and figured it was a mistake. Surely no sane adult would fine someone over a mailbox flag. Right? Wrong. 3 days later, another notice showed up. Failure to comply will result in a $300 fine and suspension of community privileges. Suspension of community privileges? What did that even mean? Would they ban me from the pool where the neighborhood kids peed all summer? Or maybe block my key card to the clubhouse that smelled like old socks? I shrugged it off. But this was only the beginning of Karen's reign of terror. The mailbox flag was stupid, sure. But then came the gnome. My wife had placed a small garden gnome near our porch. It was cute, holding a little lantern, nothing offensive. Yet within 48 hours, another letter arrived. Violation. Unauthorized lawn ornament. Apparently, Timber Pines had a strict no-gnome policy. Why? Because they claimed lawn ornaments disrupted the natural harmony of the neighborhood's aesthetic. I swear I could hear Karen's voice in my head as I read it. We can't have tacky decorations lowering our property values. Meanwhile, Karen's own yard featured 2 enormous stone lions guarding her front steps like she lived at Caesar's palace. When I mentioned this hypocrisy to her at the mailbox cluster, she smiled tightly and said, "The lions were grandfathered in. You should have read the rules before moving here." I wanted to reply, "The only thing grandfathered in here is your attitude." But I bit my tongue. Still, I wasn't about to move my gnome. He wasn't hurting anyone. I named him Gerald and doubled down by putting a tiny Santa hat on him for December. That, of course, sent Karen into full meltdown mode. 2 days later, the HOA held a special inspection of my property. 3 board members strolled up and down my driveway with clipboards, writing down nonsense like grass is 1.75 inches too tall, and Christmas lights not symmetrical. It was clear. I was now target number 1. The escalation came with the boldest move yet. Another letter. This one wasn't about Gerald or the mailbox. It was about my ski cabin. Now my family has owned a small ski cabin in the nearby mountains for decades. It's technically outside HOA jurisdiction, a different county altogether. But guess what Karen wrote? "Dear resident, it has come to our attention that you are maintaining a second property, a ski cabin, in violation of Article 9, Section 2. Residents may not hold off-site recreational dwellings that conflict with HOA-approved community amenities." I read it 3 times. They were actually trying to tell me I couldn't own a cabin because we had a community ski shuttle, which was basically a broken-down van with bald tires. I laughed so hard I nearly cried. My wife thought it was satire. But then the HOA went further. They announced at the monthly meeting that my key card access to the HOA's ski shuttle and winter clubhouse events was revoked until I relinquished my conflicting property. Imagine being banned from potluck chili night because you own your own cabin. That's when I realized this wasn't incompetence. This was a power trip. And they had no idea I was sitting on a card that would nuke their whole little empire. The ski lift franchise. See, my grandfather had been one of the original investors when Timber Ridge Ski Resort was founded decades ago. The family kept shares in the operating company, and through some odd legal twist, I now held the franchise rights to the mountain's main lift system. Translation? No one skis on that mountain unless I say so. I never flaunted it. I didn't want to be that guy who bragged about owning ski lifts. It was just a quirky inheritance. But suddenly, it was starting to look like my secret weapon. When Karen threatened to fine me $500 a week until I surrendered my cabin, I finally decided to dig in. I started documenting everything. Every absurd letter, every petty fine, every inspection. I also started digging through HOA bylaws. And oh boy, Karen had skeletons. Turns out she wasn't even allowed to have those lions. They weren't grandfathered. They were violations. She also had a shed that was 5 feet too close to her property line. And cherry on top, she had been using HOA funds to pay for her personal landscaping. The hypocrisy was so thick you could ski down it. Karen wasn't done. She sent out a community-wide email about me. Certain residents are threatening the harmony of timber pines by refusing to comply with HOA standards. These selfish actions threaten our property values and community spirit. Translation: I'm mad about a gnome. Pretty soon, nosy neighbors started whispering. One lady told me at the grocery store, "You know, if you just got rid of the gnome, this wouldn't be a problem." I smiled politely but thought, "Lady, this is bigger than a gnome." Some neighbors sided with me quietly. They slipped notes in my mailbox. "We're sick of her too." Others were too scared to speak out. Karen thrived on intimidation. That's when I decided it was time to play offense. I drafted a letter of my own, politely explaining my unique relationship with Timber Ridge Ski Resort. I didn't spell it out, but I hinted strongly that if the HOA wanted to make life difficult for me, access to certain winter amenities might mysteriously dry up. I signed it simply, "Warm regards, Gerald the gnome's owner." The whispers shifted. Suddenly, people were curious and nervous. The more Karen pushed, the pettier her citations got. She fined me $100 for leaving my trash cans out too long. Even though I brought them in the same day, she fined me $250 for having non-uniform Christmas lights. My sin? I used warm white instead of HOA-mandated cool white. My favorite citation, though, was this. Violation. Porch chair misalignment. Apparently, my Adirondack chairs were angled at 35 degrees instead of 45. Yes, she measured. At this point, it was comical. I made a binder labeled Karen's Greatest Hits and filled it with every citation. I highlighted the ridiculous parts and started circulating copies to sympathetic neighbors. One older gentleman down the street laughed so hard at porch chair misalignment that he offered to pay half my fines just for entertainment value. Karen didn't like that her authority was becoming a joke, so she doubled down. She announced a mandatory emergency board meeting to discuss the issue of resident noncompliance. Perfect. A public stage. The clubhouse was packed. About 40 neighbors showed up, most clutching folding chairs and mugs of coffee. Karen strutted in like a queen holding court, flanked by her 2 loyal board members, her best friend Linda and some guy who always looked confused. Karen opened with a speech. "We are gathered today because one resident has chosen to flagrantly disregard HOA rules, threatening the very foundation of Timber Pines harmony." She gestured at me like I was on trial for war crimes. When it was my turn, I calmly pulled out my binder. I read citations aloud one by one. The crowd chuckled. By the time I got to mailbox flag color, people were openly laughing. Then I dropped the bomb. "By the way, while you've been threatening to ban me from ski shuttles, I actually own the ski lift franchise for Timber Ridge. So technically, if anyone's access could be revoked, it's yours." The room went dead silent. Then someone in the back muttered, "Wait, he owns the lifts?" Karen stammered. That's irrelevant. This is about community standards." But the tide had turned. After I dropped the ski lift bomb at the emergency meeting, Karen's face turned the color of an overripe tomato. She stammered, flailed, and then tried to pivot. "Ownership of irrelevant recreational amenities has nothing to do with this community," she barked, slapping the table with her clipboard. The problem was everyone saw through it. My calm, factual delivery against her theatrical outrage made her look unhinged. Neighbors who had been too afraid to speak up started chuckling and whispering. Linda, her loyal sidekick, tried to back her up. "We all agreed on the no gnome policy for a reason." Someone in the audience yelled, "Then why does Karen get lions?" The room erupted in laughter. Karen snapped, "Those lions are legacy decor." I raised an eyebrow. "Funny, because the bylaws don't mention anything about legacy decor." Gasps. "Oh, it was delicious." I had highlighted that specific section in my binder. When I read it aloud, word for word, even the confused board guy squinted at Karen like, "Wait, did you lie to us?" Her meltdown escalated. She accused me of weaponizing technicalities. She accused the audience of mob behavior. She even accused Gerald the gnome of being spiritually disruptive. By the time the meeting adjourned, Karen was red-faced and trembling, while I left to a round of applause. That night, 3 neighbors slipped bottles of wine on my porch with thank you notes. Karen wasn't done yet, though. Oh no. The more she lost control, the more desperate she became. The morning after the meeting, I woke up to a yard covered in bright orange violation flags. There must have been at least 12, staked into the ground like little insults. Each had handwritten notes from Karen. Weeds visible near driveway crack. Garage door color slightly faded. Lawn edges not razor straight. Wind chime too loud. Yes, my wind chime. It was clear. Karen had gone from bureaucrat to full-on saboteur. I caught her in the act on my Ring camera one night, sneaking around with a flashlight, planting violation flags like some twisted Easter bunny. I posted the footage anonymously on the neighborhood Facebook group. Caption: "Is this how our HOA funds are being used?" Within hours, the video had hundreds of views and angry comments. One neighbor wrote, "Wait, she fined me for wind chimes too. Mine aren't even outside." Another said, "She made me repaint my door twice because she said it was the wrong shade of beige." The whispers had turned into full-blown rebellion. People were furious. But Karen? She doubled down again. She sent a mass letter threatening escalated enforcement actions for residents who spread slander about the board. At that point, I realized Karen wasn't just petty. She was unraveling. And it was time for the final strike. Through my research of the HOA bylaws, I had stumbled on a small but powerful clause. Any member of the HOA could formally request an independent financial audit if they suspected misuse of funds. Guess what I suspected? With a little help from some very motivated neighbors, and Gerald the gnome, who by now had become our unofficial mascot, we submitted the request. The board had no choice but to comply. 2 weeks later, the results came back. Let's just say, Karen's landscaping wasn't exactly coming out of her personal checkbook. Thousands of HOA dollars had been used for community beautification, projects that suspiciously lined up with Karen's own property improvements. New hedges, a stone walkway, even a koi pond. All for the neighborhood. When the audit report circulated, people lost it. Angry calls, angry emails, neighbors showing up at Karen's door demanding explanations. She tried to spin it, of course. She claimed the koi pond was aesthetic inspiration for all residents. Someone yelled back, "Then where's our pond, Karen?" The best part? The bylaws also stated that misuse of funds was grounds for immediate removal of board officers. The community was ready for blood. The next board meeting was standing room only. People spilled into the hallway, waving copies of the audit report like pitchforks. Karen walked in looking smug, as if she could still talk her way out of this. "Thank you all for attending," she began, voice dripping with fake sweetness. I raised my hand. "Actually, we'll take it from here." Gasps. Then applause. I laid out the evidence. The fines, the videos of her planting flags, the misuse of funds. I even projected the Facebook comments on a screen. Neighbor after neighbor sharing their horror stories. One woman said, "She fined my son for leaving his skateboard in the driveway." Another said, "She told me my curtains were too colorful." When I mentioned the koi pond, the room erupted in laughter. Someone shouted, "How's the community supposed to share a pond in your backyard?" Karen's face twitched. "This is all slander. Lies." That's when I pulled out the bylaws. According to Section 11, Article 2, misuse of HOA funds is grounds for immediate removal. I motioned to remove the current president. The crowd roared. It was the first unanimous vote in Timber Pine's history. Karen was out. The fallout was glorious. Karen stormed out of the meeting, shrieking that she'd sue everyone, that this wasn't over, that the FBI would be involved. But no one cared. Neighbors cheered. Kids ran around chanting, "And no more Karen." Someone even stuck a Santa hat on Gerald the gnome. and placed him on the clubhouse podium like a victory trophy. Within a week, the board had reorganized. New officers were elected, actual reasonable people. Fines were suspended. Ridiculous rules were tossed out. Suddenly, Timber Pines felt like a neighborhood again, not a dictatorship. As for Karen, she became a ghost. Her lions quietly disappeared from her yard. The koi pond went dry. Rumor had it she listed her house for sale, but couldn't get buyers because, well, everyone knew her reputation. Meanwhile, neighbors I barely knew started waving at me on the street. Some even brought over cookies to thank me. One guy joked, "We should build you a statue next to Gerald." I waved it off. No thanks. I've got enough lawn ornaments causing trouble already. To celebrate the HOA's downfall, I invited a few of my closest neighbors up to the ski cabin. It was winter, the snow was perfect, and thanks to my little ski lift card, we had priority access all weekend. The look on their faces when I casually waved us past the line at the main lift? Priceless. One neighbor said, "Wait, you weren't kidding about owning the lifts?" "Nope," I grinned. That's why Karen never stood a chance. We spent the weekend skiing, drinking hot cocoa, and toasting marshmallows. Gerald the gnome even came along, sitting proudly on the porch railing like our squad mascot. At one point someone joked, "Imagine if Karen showed up here." Another said, "She'd probably try to find the mountain for being too steep." We laughed until our sides hurt. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. The HOA nightmare was behind me. Or so I thought. A few weeks later, a certified letter arrived. Guess who from? Karen. "You will regret what you have done. I am filing a defamation lawsuit against you and the Timber Pines board. Expect to be served." I almost spit out my coffee. Defamation? For quoting her own bylaws and audit report? Please. I called a lawyer just in case. He laughed and said, "She doesn't have a case. This is just a scare tactic." Sure enough, no lawsuit ever materialized. She was bluffing. But neighbors weren't scared anymore. They were annoyed. One guy posted her lawsuit threat letter on Facebook with the caption, "Karen's greatest comedy show." That was the final nail in the coffin. Karen's credibility was dead. She stopped showing her face entirely. With Karen gone, Timber Pines transformed. The new board was reasonable, transparent, and most importantly, fun. The first order of business? Repealing ridiculous rules. Gnomes. Allowed. Mailbox flags. Any color you like. Porch chairs? Align them however you want. We even held a community barbecue at the clubhouse. Kids played, neighbors laughed. Gerald the gnome stood proudly on the buffet table next to the potato salad. For once, it felt like a community instead of a prison. People thanked me again and again, but honestly, I just felt relieved. Relieved that the madness was over. And as for the ski cabin, I kept it wide open for friendly neighbors. We started a tradition. Every winter, one big cabin weekend for Timber Pines. Months later, Karen officially sold her house and disappeared. Some say she moved to another HOA and immediately tried to run for president. Others say she bought a condo with no rules and spends her days yelling at pigeons. As for me, life's good. My lawn is gnome friendly, my mailbox flag is red, and my wind chimes sing proudly in the breeze. And every time I ride the ski lift, I can't help but chuckle. Because while Karen thought she could bully me over a mailbox and a gnome, she had no idea the real power I held. In the end, it wasn't about the lift franchise, the cabin, or even Gerald. It was about standing up to absurd authority, documenting everything, and reminding people that bullies only win when you let them. Now Timber Pines is peaceful, the HOA is fair, and Gerald the gnome? He's a legend. And if Karen ever tries to make a comeback, well, let's just say Gerald's already saving her a seat at the next board meeting.